Well, listen, we're gonna start now. So thank you all for joining us. So today we're hosting a webinar. So GritSearch is hosting a webinar on the changing landscape of software engineering. Just by way of introduction, my name's Paul Endicott. I'm the CEO for GritSearch. GritSearch is a recruitment solutions company that really focuses on identifying talent that can build product and then commercialize product. So delighted to have this esteemed panel, who I'm going to come on to introduce in a moment. And you know, this discussion really on kind of the future of software engineering and careers in software engineering. I think what's super interesting is that, you know, if we look at the demand for tech talent and software engineering in particular, it's never been more demanding. I mean, Singapore has established itself already as a world financial hub. You've got a lot of the larger global MNCs that have their regional headquarters or indeed even global headquarters based here. But also you've got this vibrant VC scene that's led to a lot of high growth tech startups getting invested in and growing strategically from Singapore, either regionally or even globally. And that's meant that there's a huge demand and an ongoing increasing demand for software engineers. So it's a super interesting place to be involved in, you know, a very sustainable place to be involved in, but there are challenges around how potentially you can build your career, but equally from companies in terms of how they go about hiring the right tech talent. So it's interesting, a survey from KPMG recently said that Singapore has potentially taken a position as the world's leading technology hub from Silicon Valley. Now, that's probably a debate on its own, but we will kind of touch on this as we go through the webinar. But the discussion is really going to be covering, you know, how do you go about hiring the right talent, and what do companies look for when they're hiring engineering talent? Programming skills that are in demand. Challenges that employers are facing when hiring, and what solutions they may have. Is it about localized talent now, or is it about actually remote and multi-locational hubs? The career pathways in never-changing software engineering space. And then that final question, can Singapore really compete with Silicon Valley? So before we start, I'd just like to introduce you to our panel. So we have Beverly Dolor here, who's the CTO of Pace Enterprise. Welcome, Beverly. Sau Sheong Chang, who's the CEO of SP Digital, and Ned Lowe, who is the CTO of Singlife. Now, I'm just going to pass over to them actually quickly to introduce themselves and give a bit of background before we get into the questions. So Sau Sheong, you're kind of first on my screen. So do you want to give a quick intro to yourself and your background first?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So my name is Sau Sheong. I've been in the industry for about 26 years now. So this is my 26th year doing tech. I've been spending most of the time actually leading product development teams, product engineering development teams in Singapore. I spent about 10 years in doing startups, one of them my own startup, and afterwards joining a couple of other startups. About 10 years in American MNCs, including Yahoo, where Beverly and I were both in, and also in HP, where I led a cloud computing lab, and then also in PayPal, which was my last job before I joined Singapore Power, which is where I am today. I spent about maybe 2.5, 3 years doing digital transformation in my initial time in Singapore Power. But then after that, I transitioned to leading a business unit called SP Digital, pretty much doing the same thing, but also building products that we eventually sell to our customers. So today, our customers include people like Changi Airport, Nanyang Technological University, and many others as well. So that's really like a very brief description of my career. And in terms of the other activities I do, I also lead the GopherCon conference in Singapore. So we have the largest Go conference in Singapore today. We didn't actually have one last year in 2020, but we're going to do one this year. I've been involved in the developer community for Java initially, then in Ruby, and now in Go. And I've also written 4 books, programming books. So Three of them to do with Ruby as well as R, and my last one was in Go. So that's a quick one on me.
Wow, great, Sau Sheong. And Beverly.
Yeah, hi, Beverly here. I am from the Philippines. Basically, I've been in Singapore for 12 years, and I've been in this industry for the past 20 years as well. Like Sau Sheong, I've started from a very corporate Toshiba, and then startup, and then the big MNC Yahoo. So kind of like have that in my journey, the 20-year journey also, and I've been grateful and blessed um, to be around people like our founder right now in Pace, who has been doing all of this startup, that were successfully acquired by other company, and therefore we were able to kind of like scale up whatever we have built as well. So I think for my background also, I've started as a web developer, and then ended up focusing more on the back end side of things. And throughout the year, I think one thing that I really like about when I started this career back in 2000 is that it's the advent of the mobile technology, and we were there when it was spiking. We were part of the SMS, the MMS, those things. And then when we went to Yahoo, it's kind of like, yeah, this is now the search using the browser of the phones and all that. So I think that's one thing that I really treasured as part of my journey, and hopefully and until now, those learnings are very much used. And one thing also that I have encountered throughout the year is how to build products that are localized, that are closer to the audience itself. I think that's the fun part of building products. You're able to see how those people you're targeting are using them and improving their experiences as well. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Beverly. And finally, but last but not least, Ned.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ned. So my original sort of training was actually as an electronic engineer, which is perhaps a little bit different from a lot of people who've started with computer science. But I think that engineering background has really helped me, and maybe something that we'll talk about a little bit today. But out of uni, I did what a lot of people who were graduating in the London universities did, and that was going to investment banking. Sold my soul to the devil a little bit there, and worked building trading systems for about 12 years, initially in London, but then in Asia and New York. Decided, similar to the other two journeys that we just heard about, that I didn't want to work for a huge company. I wanted to get a little more entrepreneurial, so I quit and set up my own company. Did that for a while and had a lot of fun. Learned a lot about hiring, about myself, about the real world, and then had the pleasure of working for AWS after that and helping other people with cloud journeys and such like. And then more recently, the CTO at Singlife, which is a digital life insurer based out of Singapore. Might have heard of us in the news recently with a sort of a big merger that we're doing at the moment with Viva Singapore to create actually one of the biggest life insurance companies in the region. So that's very exciting for us right now. Great to meet you all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ned. Okay, so just before I kick off with the first question, just some housekeeping for all those who are on. You'll see there's a little button at the bottom saying Q&A. If you do have questions as we go through, please feel free to pop that in the box there. We will moderate that as we go and feed those in to the discussion. I mean, the key for this is trying to keep it as light and as interesting as possible. But if you do have questions, please pop them in. We'll have a bit of time, obviously, for Q&A at the end of the session as well. Okay, so first question, and Sasha, I'm going to just ask you to answer this first, and then Beverly, Ned, please feel free to drop in your opinions as well. So from your perspective, how have you seen the software engineering profession really evolve, since say five years ago here in Singapore in the region?
So not so much of the region, because I've not really gone out too much to the region. I know a little bit on Indonesia as well as Malaysia, and a bit of Vietnam, but not too much in the other countries. In Singapore, I think the changes have been happening quite rapidly for the past 5 years. I think a lot of interest and a lot of attention has been paid to software in general, in tech in general. As you know, and in Singapore, a lot of things are driven by the government, through the government. A lot of companies are owned by the government in some way or another. So the changes within the government, from the time that 5 years ago, I'm not sure what's the duration, I would say the split from IDA into GovTech and IMDA, splitting really the people who are doing a lot of the actual work from the regulators part of it. That has tremendous impact in Singapore, and that has changed the scene a lot as well. Also in the past 5 years, I would say the startups that have come up and started to gain a lot of prominence in the past few years. The ones from the region as well as the ones coming from Singapore, like Grab, for example, Gojek, coming in from Indonesia and setting up teams here. And also very recently, the arrival of the Chinese tech companies like Tencent, like ByteDance, and so on. That has really changed the scene quite a lot. So I think the scene is very exciting today. There's a lot of activities, a lot of things are happening. So it's a really good time to be in the tech industry. And in the past 5 years, these things have been changing quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And Beverly, is that something you've seen? Because obviously you've been involved now in a few different startups. Obviously 2 successful exits, which is great. I mean, how have you seen the software engineers you were hiring for 5 years ago begin to change in terms of what you're looking for now, from both that, but also maybe from an adaptation to a programming language perspective, and what kind of languages you feel are more relevant or more, I suppose, sustainable in the medium term?
Yeah, I think for me, when I do hiring, sometimes I try to be language agnostic also, especially when I see that person or that candidate has a very, I look for passionate people. Like you can see that when people talk, or based on the projects and how they describe their work in that project and all that. So I think it doesn't. I mean, my what I look for in a candidate doesn't change over time. You still look for the same qualities. The qualities shouldn't change, The tools may change, but the quality of the engineer, of the person that you're hiring, shouldn't
sorry,
change.
when you say qualities, what kind of quality, what would you define as those kind of consistent qualities?
Because for me, the language that they're using, the tools that they're using are just tools. Those can be learned, those can be acquired. But the quality of being accountable, being responsible, being self-starter, or being innovative or creative. I think engineers are very creative people. I think in the way that they code, in the way that they solve problems, I think those are the things that I'm looking for in terms of quality. Because if you have those quality, learning would be something that is just one thing that they will add up in their toolbox, basically. But if you find people that they have this, they have that, they have this in their toolbox, but they never really used it, or they never really dive on it and really be passionate about it, I think that's the part that I'm looking for. A quality for people who likes to build products and solve problems with those products.
Makes sense. And do you think in terms of that last 5 years, has that come through more in terms of the expectation on engineers to be more creative than they were? Is that something that you look for now more than you did? Or has that always been there? Has that been a consistent?
Partly, yes. Now because there's a lot of tools right now. There's a lot of online courses or tutorials or learning materials, and therefore you are expecting people also to be abreast with what's happening out there. I think that's the only thing that you kind of look for also, additional to what the intrinsic capabilities or qualities of the person, whether they are actually using the tools that they have, or the materials or the resources available to them.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And Ned, is that something similar to what you've seen over your time?
Like it's very hard to argue with the point around hiring people with the right sort of attitude and that kind of thing. That's very hard to argue with, and so totally agree with that. I do think there is one other big difference though, and maybe 5 years is the wrong number, but a little bit longer than that, is that the emergence of so many frameworks and languages that have made things which used to be quite complex are now a lot easier, is that that's led to, maybe not in all cases, but in 80% of cases, the role of the engineer is more around understanding what the correct framework or tool is, and then kind of plugging them together in a way that makes sense and can be industrialized and scale. So 15 years ago, at least in finance tech, we were writing everything in C. But a bit of C and C++, depending on what we were doing. And the challenges involved in that versus typically now in finance tech, where a lot of it's written in Python, is a very different set of problems. And sure, the engineering mindset is similar, but there are different, the amount of productivity you can have and the amount of output you can get is much higher in a higher order language like Python. Similarly, on the front ends, there's that joke article that went out, the state of JavaScript in 2017 or whatever it was, where it's basically 200 different frameworks to do the simplest little task. And what's really important, particularly in JavaScript, is knowing what to use and how to piece it together, rather than being necessarily the best, at handling memory overflows and pointers. And so that's put a lot of onus on the engineer to be very well read, to be keeping abreast of everything that's going on, because otherwise you can just miss entire swathes of the industry that can pass you by, and also the productiveness of your output needs to be more business aligned, because you can't sort of say, oh well, it took me 2 weeks because I was dealing with this crazy race condition in this crazy concurrent piece of C++ code I was writing, if all you're really doing is plugging stuff together. And so then you build up more business awareness, maybe more design skills. And so in some ways, I feel like the engineer has actually had to diversify their skill quite a lot, and understand a lot more about what's going on, which puts a heavy toll on the number of skills that someone needs.
Yeah. So you'd say that actually the role of the software engineer has probably become more complex or demanding right now in terms of how it interfaces within the business?
Broader, maybe not more demanding, but instead of it being a sort of a very narrow, and of course I'm not talking about all cases. If you're a high frequency trader writing algos that are running on an FPGA, right? That's a very, very specific skill set. But I mean, for most people, it's become shallower and broader, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just sticking, with you a moment, Ned, and then I would like Sau Sheong and Beverly's opinion on this. I mean, if someone's just started out their career in software engineering, and we talked about, okay, the qualities that might be consistent, and actually, from a language perspective, people can learn new languages. Often, I suppose it does depend on the demand or the time constraints a company might be needing to get someone up to speed. But if someone's starting out in their software engineering career, what piece of advice would you give them from a longer term perspective in terms of how they position themselves in the right way? And it's quite a broad question, but just quite keen to understand if someone is thinking, right, I want to go into software engineering, but I'm not sure where I'm going to end up. What advice would you give them right now?
So it's two different things and two very different things. The first one is around the tech, and that would be very much around if you want to build a career in tech and you want to have that long sort of runway before your skills become a little outdated, is around understanding, the whole sort of go where the ball is going, not where the ball is now kind of argument, which is that if you were to Google best jobs in tech right now, the things that you would pop up, by the time you had mastered those topics, would probably have become increasingly commoditized, and increasingly there would be frameworks and SaaS providers out there who were sort of making it a lot easier. Whereas if you think, okay, what's going to be needed in 5 years' time, or what's more emerging, not further than that, because otherwise you're just gambling, then you can sort of future-proof yourself. So I'm a big believer that data ops and an understanding of how to sort of productionize data pipelines and data warehouses and that kind of thing is going to become, it's going to be massive in 2 or 3 years, where everyone's going to be looking for people, and there's only going to be like 20 people who can basically command whatever salary they want. So having that kind of thought, I think, is important. But to a second answer, which is totally different, would be around technology is, and I guess it goes a little bit to that whole point about shallow and broader. Technology is a tool that can be applied to many, many different things. And having a decent or a good understanding of the industry in which you're applying it will allow you to go further than if you just become a sort of a jack of all trades, where, I'm a great Java developer and I'll pop in and out of different industries. If you can understand an industry, then you'll do well. So choosing that industry wisely, and not just choosing it because Google told you it's where the most best salaries come from, or what your friends told you to do, is important. And so I chose finance, and I've spent my entire career in finance tech, and that has, I think, done me well. That specialization has allowed me to then get opportunities that I wouldn't have done if I'd started off in healthcare, but had decided afterwards that actually finance was where I wanted to go. So choosing that wisely, and not just, I've heard that this company's cool, I'm going to choose that company. Once that's such a non-deliberate decision. You've got to really think about, what industry do I want to be in and why. I think that's very important.
Okay, makes sense. And Beverly, I can see you're nodding. Is that something you'd also agree with, or is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think I was looking back at, like 20 years from now, like what was my decision at that time? How do I feel during this time when I wanted to choose? So when I choose my course, computer science, and then we have to choose our specialty, the first 2 years of our career is just building up fundamentals, and then you have to choose which of the branches you want to go through. I chose information technology because of the fact that it's the practicality, the you build applications for businesses, wherein I really like solving problem on systems. So my first, you have to be intentional about your actions also on where your career is heading. This project that I did was an enrollment system for a school. I really like it because they were able to use and make use of it. I like the fact that they were able to use it and make their work more efficient instead of writing on papers and whatnot. And then our thesis is about a POS system for a company. I think that those are the things that I feel like I really like that. I really like the feeling of solving problems through technology, business.
Yeah.
So with that intent, that's when you kind of like you from a fresh grad perspective, you try to create problems or try to create applications that that would take you to the first step to your next job, to your first job, that would take you to the to open doors for you as your first job. And then when you're inside that job and you really like what you're doing, my first language was Python. I don't know Python. So I have to learn it. I have to kind of like build applications on it. So, but that actually is just part of the growth process, because what I really like is I'm solving problems for them, accounting problems, POS problems, any other problems. And for me, that was the enjoyment, And I think as an advice, I think that's the one that that's why I'm agreeing with Ned. It's not about the company that you're joining. It's about what types of problems or what types of things are you going to do there that would encourage your new self, like your startup self, like to move forward or to fall in love even further on that career. And I'm just blessed and fortunate that I did the decisions that I made led me to this stage, because I made those decisions intentionally and really enjoy as I go along on that. So so I guess that's the advice. It's really more know where you are passionate about, because when you are
Mm.
passionate about, that will basically your fuel to do whatever it is that you need. So see what your value is as a technologist,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you know exactly what it means for you. Then you can just, anywhere they place you, I think you will just grow and succeed.
Makes sense. Okay. And Sau Sheong, I've got a question here from Amit in the audience who said, you know,
Sure.
is it advisable for someone to go for a full stack development and do a lot of shallow learning at the start, or to really begin to specialize at the start in terms of front end or back end? I don't know what your views are on that.
Yeah, I I can answer that, but I just want to jump in on the previous question a little bit
Yeah, yeah,
because
please.
I have a very different perspective from both Ned and Beverly actually. So it's very interesting because it's very interesting that Ned actually spent like his whole career in fintech. Um, and I actually came from a computer engineering background. So my degree was in computer engineering. And when I first joined the course, I asked, what is computer engineering? They say, okay, it's 50% electronics engineering. That's where all the lecturers come from, and 50% from com science, right? So that's where they put this course together and put these two bunch of people together, and then we learned from them and understand the value of engineering from there. So my perspective is different because I have been in many, many different domains and many, many different industries in my career. And I started off with a telco in Singtel, then I went to government in NCB, then I did the startup in basically technology alone, doing portals and internet. And then I went like, I mean, I did gaming, for example, and now I'm in power and utilities. And so in between, I've done so many different things, right? And I think what I picked up in every single one of them is different. And it added on to the value that I bring to the table in the subsequent companies, because the diversity of background that I had, I think that is something that if somebody were very focused in one area, wouldn't be able to bring to somewhere else. I mean, I recognize that the specialization, the value of specialization, because as I joined SV doing utility, I recognize that, hey, you know, you need to have that capability to understand the domain really well to be able to deliver the kind of products for that particular domain, the particular industry. But at the same time, you know, if you are looking at, as what I did originally in SP was to do digital transformation, if you're so much embedded into the industry already, then you are part of the industry, and are you able to actually bring something different from looking from outside? I think it's harder, right? I'm not saying that it's not possible to do it. So I do have a slightly different perspective to having the value of, say, coming from different backgrounds in journey in terms of a career. Coming back to the question on, you know, should you specialize or should you, you know, get more shallow kind of a perspective in things? Again, I differ in that slightly. I mean, to explain that, I wanted to talk about how I differ in perspective in compared to Beverly, right? I am more free-willing, like in my career choices. I don't deliberate, actually. I never deliberate. I never really think so, okay, this is where I want to go, and I'm very focused, very you know, single-minded, and this is where I want to go. I take my career as an adventure, right? Actually, I take my life as an adventure, yeah. And I'll go wherever I think things that strikes me, because the whole point for me in getting into technology is the exploration, is the excitement of creativity, the excitement of not knowing what's going to happen next. Because you know what, technology has changed a lot for the past, at least in my career, the past 26 years. It has changed so much, right? And that is the part of the excitement that drives me, and the passion that drives me, that I keep on exploring, keep on figuring out what's next, and so on. So I never really put much mind to say, hey, you know, this is exactly where I want to go. Because honestly speaking, I think the part of not knowing where I'm going and exploring and trying out different things is the thing that drives me. So the point about specializing in a particular technology and being more broader based, I would personally choose being more broader based, because that for me represents the exploration part of it. Having specialization though, I think is very, very important if you want to be good in something. but the exploration part of it gives you broader scope to be able to bring experiences from different parts of your background, and that gives you an edge in certain things, because you know what, if getting into a particular specialization, if you choose the wrong one, then actually you are in trouble. Right? And to illustrate that, you know, when I came out, actually I wanted to do I wanted to take a specialization in NetWare. I'm not sure how many people remember NetWare. You know, it was the first distributed operating system, and I was wanted to be a NetWare specialist, but it cost money, right? And I didn't have money when I first came out, so I decided not to. And afterwards, you know what happened to NetWare, right? So I mean, the fact that I think most people don't really know what NetWare is. It got sort of beaten up by Microsoft and eaten up literally by Microsoft. And so for me, that was a very important learning point, because it really taught me that, hey, you know what, if I specialize too much in a technology or specialize too much in a particular industry or domain, then I lose that edge where I can be more free-flowing and be able to flexible to go to different places and do different things. So anyway, just wanted to get my perspective on this.
No, thank you.
Can I just, can I just,
please.
Because I think I didn't explain myself. Like, yeah, I agree with Sau Sheong. My intentionality is about like, I saw the technology, the how to use technology to kind of like help businesses. So I never, I mean, if you see my career also, I was never like in one specialty also, or in one industry per se, or in one language per se, because I see myself as a tool also for the company. Wherever I am, that's how I see myself. Like, okay, I need to add value to this company and help them out wherever I can. I think that's the part, that's the intentionality that I was saying, that, you know, I saw technology as such that I enjoyed it so much that I was able to solve problems. And therefore, anything that I do, irregardless of what industry it is, it's just gonna fuel you in one way. So I just wanna clarify that, Sasha. I was never like going for fintech or anything else. None at all.
Well,
Thanks,
fintech is
Leslie.
great. You know? I mean, I love fintech.
Yeah. So, but I just want to respond a little bit to that. And I think once someone has a credibility in the market, and once someone has is well known or is trusted, then jumping around between industries is relatively simple. But if you are not well known, and if you haven't established that credibility, and I think this is increasingly true, and you know, maybe Paul, you could comment on this. I think that moving between industries is not easy, right? Because and when I was talking about making that decision very deliberately, it was more as a reflection of the lack of opportunities that maybe are sort of limited because of previous decisions you've made. And so, for example, and I probably wouldn't say this as much now, but 5 years ago, I definitely would, when I was younger and more foolish, that if someone was trying to join my team as a senior developer and they hadn't worked in finance before, I probably wouldn't have interviewed them, right? And I say maybe I'm changing my opinion on that a little bit these days, but 5 years ago, that would have been the case, and I'm guessing that's true of 80–90% of hiring managers out there. And my point about very sort of deliberate decision making is that choose your industry wisely, because once you're in there, you may struggle to jump out. And within, again, and I'm using finance there a little too much perhaps, and maybe it's different to other places, but if you become an expert in equity trading and then you go for a job in derivative pricing, the people will be like, ooh, but you've never done derivatives before, and you wouldn't even get the interview. And so that specialization I see not as necessarily a good thing, but as a thing that just has kind of happened to the universe, and that therefore make your decisions wisely.
And I think, I mean, from our perspective, I would say that, you know, that is fair towards certain industries. I think particularly in finance, and when you look at crypto, and they're very, very specific, and there's specific backgrounds they'd be looking for people that have done that role before. I think when you look generally and you apply different models. Is the company as an e-commerce platform where, you know, there's a lot of volume and you know, that engagement, then there's certain, they may look at similar models, and then it's about the tech stack versus necessarily the industry per se. But I think, you know, within finance, there's obviously the regulatory concerns, and there's a whole bunch of different areas where specialization can become quite important if someone is looking to pursue their career along, you know, specific lines within that. But I mean, this is quite a nice segue actually, because one of the things we've noticed, particularly when we're dealing with companies that are maybe establishing themselves, and the hiring managers maybe in Australia, maybe in the UK, often the feedback we get is that as a profession within software engineering, people seem to move about a lot more. You know, could be every year, could be every 2 years. And for some hiring managers, that can be a concern in terms of, okay, you know, is that actually a good thing? Are they going to be loyal to the business? At the same time, we'll talk with other hiring managers who say, well, actually, you know, the tech landscape's moving so quickly. It's important people that have that agile thinking, that can move. And often, you know, from a candidate perspective, we find that people want to be involved, particularly from a development standpoint, in really interesting projects that are going to grow them and develop them and challenge them. So what are your thoughts when it comes to talent that is moving around quite frequently? Do you see that as a strength or a weakness? I mean, how do you view those types of profiles? Beverly, maybe I'll put that to you first.
Yeah, so yeah, I've seen profiles like that, you know, like a lot of different companies in a few years' time and all that. I think there's nothing bad to it. I think that's when your curiosity leads you to ask those questions to those candidates. You know, why are they moving and so on and so forth. There are like, some of them are just personal reasons. Some of them are really like they're just struggling in, you know, like making it through that particular thing. So I think as an employer, I think from a point of view of an employer or as an employee as well, um, you like to stay in a place wherein you are valued in a way that probably it's not about the compensation. It's just really about like, does your is what you are putting out is being recognized and being helpful. You know, you see yourself as being helpful to that place. And I think I think not just for our industry, but in any type of work, right? You want to know that you're making a contribution one way or the other. I think when you have that kind of people who actually like see that, you know what, I'm helping out build something here. I think those are the people that actually stay on and really like fight it out, the highs and the lows, with the highs and the lows. And those people who are like really looking out, they have their own personal reasons. Some of them really just want to learn a new language. Some of them really just want to try out a new industry and whatnot. So you cannot turn them down because of that. But however, as an employee and as an employer as well, I would like to see people who would be there for us, you know, like to help us build out products, especially on a startup. It's difficult when you have to hire like multiple times in a year also, just because, you know, people are looking for other opportunities. I think that's my take on it. Like I don't see it as a bad thing. I think that's when the conversation happens, and then that's when you go to the psyche of the person and see the reason behind it.
Yeah, right. And Sau Sheong, is that something similar you'd see when you're hiring?
Yeah, I actually very similar views to Beverly. I think it's very subjective. I mean, it is a fact in the industry that people move around, and I wouldn't really I wouldn't really say to anyone that who moves around that necessarily is bad. So it really depends on why they are moving around, and also the honesty and transparency when somebody is interviewing for a job, and recognizing how long they actually intend to stay, and so on and so forth. Of course, if somebody says that, yeah, I intend to stay for long, and within the year they leave, then I mean, I would question, right, the moves. But I wouldn't generally expect everyone to stay on for like forever. Yeah, that's not really my expectations. And I think as a manager, then it is my role to really try to manage that situation, as in to build in the correct pipelines to bring people in, and then to get people up to a certain competency level in order to deliver the work done and so on. So that's part of the job of the manager, and recognizing the industry to be such to work around that. I think that's what we need to do. From the perspective of whether is it good for an employee or not, I think being able to learn new things, being able to figure out what are the things that drives you and see what kind of value you can bring to the organization. I think those things are all very, very valid reasons. But of course, those are the things that can also be done in a larger organization, right? Because you don't necessarily need to jump to a different organization to achieve those things. Then it depends on whether the organization that you're in is able to provide you that kind of switch in roles as well. So I think there are many circumstances to it. But for me, I'm not really I'm not really against it, but I think I'm against it for a different reason.
Yeah, no, fair. And Ned?
So I think to Sau Sheong's point about within the same organization, I stayed at one company for 12 years, but within that 12-year period, I moved to 4 or 5 different countries, and in each country I had a different role, and I think that's how I kind of kept it fresh. Every 2.5, 3 years, I would move around. And I think that was very helpful for me in general, that when I did start feeling like work was getting a bit repetitive or I wasn't learning as much, that I could move within the company and then get a whole new fresh set of experiences and opportunities. That said, at the end of 12 years, when I then started doing other things, I realized how rusty some of my tech skills had become, and that I'd become a little specialized in a few different areas, and that there'd been whole new things that had come up, and I'd read about them, and I'd done tutorials, and I'd done little sort of side projects, but it's not until you really get your hands dirty you're like, oh wow, this is something totally bigger than I'd realized. And I think that by changing company, at least relatively often, you get real hands-on experience of these kind of things, or have the opportunity to if you choose the right company, and that you can learn a lot that way. And I think that's why we've got issues right now with hiring DevOps people and cloud engineers, and we've got issues with data ops and what I was talking about before, is there's not that many companies who are really doing it. And so if you're in a company that isn't, and you're doing tutorials and you're trying to learn and you're doing as much as you can, you're still going to be limited versus actually doing it as a real job, and getting your hands sort of super dirty. So I do think it's important for people to move regularly. Now, that said, anything less than about 2 years, I question, because in 2 years, if you're moving, I'm not saying there's always good excuses or reasons, so I'm not saying it's impossible, but I question it, because if people are leaving a company because they can't gel with their team, or they believe that they're somehow better than what the team is doing, or whatever the issue might be, then that makes me think, well, are they going to be able to gel in my team? Are they going to be able to take the work that I'm doing? And sometimes the job that we do is super exciting, and sometimes it's not. It's just that's why they pay you. And so if it's someone who is jumping around because they can never find a home that they're happy in, then that's a very different thing than looking for more exciting opportunities or different technologies. That's a cultural and personal thing, not a sort of an intellectual and curiosity thing. So when I'm interviewing, I try to, if people have jumped around a lot, I try and determine, is it because you can't fit in anywhere? In which case, why would you be able to fit in with my team?
Yeah. Okay, no, fair. And just coming back to the kind of core technical languages then. So if you look right now and you are looking at the landscape and the emerging sort of technology skills that are coming to the market, or you're seeing growing and evolving in the market, what do you see and what do you foresee would be most in demand in the future? Now, we're not saying 20 years, but if you were backing something that you were thinking, right, I really want to kind of double down on this language or this stack, what would you see as areas that engineers should be looking at and looking really to develop their knowledge further in? Anyone want to go first for this one?
I can take a stab at it. I think the first of all, I believe in fundamentals. I mean, I'm kind of a bit of old-fashioned in that way. I believe in fundamentals. I believe that once you have the fundamentals in place, then all the programming languages, after a while, they look somewhat the same, right? Of course, I mean, not exactly the same, but they will definitely be differences. But a lot of the programming languages are, they learn from each other anyway, right? So they would take a little bits and pieces from here and there, and then they collaborate together because the creator of the programming language thinks is a better way of organizing things. And that could be popular and so on and so forth, but the fundamentals still remains. So if you go far down enough, right, some of the fundamentals of the programming languages and so on, you will land up to be like C, right? A lot of those things comes to root with C. So if you have the fundamentals correct, I think it doesn't really matter which one it is. You can probably pick it up relatively quickly. But having said that, there are certain things that are quite different, like procedural versus functional. Like, so you will get into some of these things, and being able to and object oriented and so on. So you as long as you actually latch onto those that or rather you get yourself a little bit more familiarized with the fundamentals of those things, I think you'll be able to go a little bit further. Yeah. So I don't know whether that sort of answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, Ned, Beverly, do you have any thoughts around that as well?
Beverly, do you want to go? I'm happy to go. I just don't want to talk over you. All right. So I strongly believe that it comes back to that point again around our sort of the DevOps, data ops, cloud ops principles that I think we're seeing a big blurring of concerns, again, going back to this whole broader but shallower thing, that if you were a software engineer right now, thinking about how you were going to build a piece of software, if you didn't have a good, deep understanding of what me and a few of my friends are calling full stack cloud, and what I mean by that is taking advantage of serverless principles, taking advantage of managed services within a provider like AWS or Google or whoever, you're always going to design your applications in a particular way. Whereas if you have been exposed, or even better, if you had deep understanding of something like serverless, you might completely change the way that you design things. But the number of companies out there that are doing these sort of full stack cloud or serverless, or these DevOps first principles is relatively few. And so finding Java developers and increasingly even finding JavaScript developers, which 3-4 years ago was bloody impossible, but now is become much easier, is a very transferable skill right now. Whereas finding the people who've got real hands-on experience of building complex serverless systems with complex orchestration, there's just not that many people who are actually doing it at scale and production. And so if people could learn that, probably by joining one of the few people who are doing it at scale, then I think you'll have at least the next 10 years sorted. Data ops in particular, like no one's doing that well at scale. No one's doing it well. Maybe some people are, but I'm not aware of anyone who's doing it really well at scale.
Right, thanks, Ned. Beverly?
Yeah, I think I agree to both to Sau Sheong and Ned also, like as the languages or as the technology evolves, so are you. You need to evolve as well as you go along and learn new things. And I think for me, it's really more on fundamentals as well. Like how you learn things might be different from how you learn like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because now you have more things that you can read, tutorials, language, or online courses. So I think it goes both ways. But the most important thing that you need to consider when you're going through a new language or focusing yourself to committing yourself, it's a commitment. When you learn something new, it's a commitment, because it's not going to always be like the smoothest ride ever. You will encounter problems that you will probably need to stay on, like solve it for 2-3 days at a time. But just be there, like as long as you have that you have the capacity to actually like, yeah, I really want to learn this, that will push you also to actually do that, because yeah, learning is just another, a commitment that you need, that you put yourself into, that you will commit in that, whether it's a good or the bad days of experiencing that.
Yeah, great. And I can't believe we're actually coming down to the last kind of 10 minutes already. I mean, we could talk about this all day. So I'm gonna take a couple of questions that have come onto the Q&A. I mean, there's one here actually that ties into this discussion point. Is it possible for someone who has no tech background, but who has been picking up their programming languages in their own time to become a software engineer? I mean, what are your thoughts about taking someone that hasn't had, specifically worked as a software engineer within a company? I mean, what is their path? Is it an internship? How do you see that person making that transition? Because it's an interesting time right now where we have this huge demand. You look at ByteDance, Tencent, Zoom, the demand for talent here is only going to get higher. There's only so much supply. So if you want to base something in Singapore, we kind of probably need to start thinking about out the box around how do we get this talent into those roles if they don't necessarily have the experience yet. I mean, how would you tend to facilitate that? Beverly, maybe starting with you first.
Yeah, I think it's really more on I think we have this concept of what work is before, like it's in the office or it's in anywhere, and therefore you kind of like look for certain careers that, for example, I'm just giving an example, like an advertising. You like to be there in the place wherein you are surrounded with creative people who's like throwing all of these ideas and all that. But now that was taken away from us. You cannot go to the office and be with these people, and therefore probably that's one of the drive sometimes for some people to go and do that career, like, because there's physical thing that happens when you are together with this group of people also. So some people would think of another career that trumps, and I met people that are really, really great engineers who came from a background of, they were like learning languages, like I forgot the course, but it's basically the human language. They're doing that. Some of them are psychologists before, and they were able to do a good transition. The reason why they did that transition is really their curiosity of what they wanted to do next. So that person, when I was talking to her, like she's learning language, human language. I forgot really the term, but she said, like, when I transitioned to programming, actually it was easier because the fundamentals of what syntax and logic and all that are, for her it's kind of like, yeah, I'm just learning a new language in essence and whatnot. So I guess, and then she was like very into like some people are very into like games and they want to learn that. So I guess it's really about your interest also. And I've seen successful people who have done that. So definitely, I mean, if that's something that you would like to pursue it, but just make sure that you commit your time to it, because it will require time for you to learn it, to be involved in it. You cannot just like make like, oh, okay, I want to transition there because that's a good paying job. It's not. You have to actually learn it, the fundamentals. You cannot. I just encountered one person recently. He said like, oh, all of us are engineers, but well, not necessarily. I mean, if you're not able to troubleshoot your program, you're not able to spend time to, to fix what's happening in your application, then you have to really spend time on it. You have to know how to build stuff and fix stuff also, if you really want to deep dive on software engineering.
Okay, great. That's very useful. And actually, there's another question here. So Mark's asking, how would the growing popularity of low-code, no-code platforms affect the demand for engineers over the next 2 to 3 years? Now I can see you nodding quite rapidly there, Ned. So I don't know if you want to answer that first, and Sau Sheong, get your thoughts.
Yes, sorry, but this is a passion thing for me, and I talk and write about this a lot. So I've always been playing around with low no code programming languages, whatever, for pretty much my entire career, and I've always thought that they were rubbish. And then about 2 years ago, I used Bubble, and I don't know if anyone here has used Bubble yet, but if you haven't, go off and try it. And it blew my mind. I literally spent the rest of the day just lying in bed thinking, oh my God, what just happened? Because it was almost like the first time you use Wix after a lifetime of Dreamweaver, that you suddenly see the potential of it all. And the specific answer around what do I think this will do for engineers, assuming that it hits the heights that I hope it will, with things like Honeycomb from AWS and other ones that are arriving, is that it will get rid of all of the mediocre engineers. Is that there is an entire industry of crappy engineers who only exist to help business users do stuff that really they ought to be able to do for themselves, but because they don't have the tools, they can't. And the feedback loop of a business user asking for something and then seeing results is basically the entire premise of the Agile movement. If the business user themselves can design and build journeys and workflows and doesn't need to go to someone else, your feedback loop is, divide by 0, right? You just solve the problem, and the productivity just goes through the roof for the business users, who will need to learn a little bit about logic and testing and debugging, of course, right? But I think that'll be normal. So then the engineers get pushed into a more specialized set of technologies, which will all be around creating functionality and microservices that then get plugged into these low no-code environments that the business users stitch together. And that the skill will be creating really understandable and clear APIs that can then be consumed and stitched together by business users. And at the risk of repeating myself, it goes back to this whole data ops, DevOps, right? It'll be about creating this very sort of smooth middle and back end that can then be stitched together by other people. And we'll see huge advances in productivity from business people. Like, how many of us have worked in enterprises where the business people are off writing their own little Excel tools and VBA and whatever, because they just don't want to talk to tech, right? This whole shadow tech department exists because they know they can build something faster than explaining to a tech person how it should work and then being disappointed with the results. If this enables them to do it properly without, Excel and no version control and all of that kind of the problems that come with that, then this is win-win-win for the industry. I'm very excited about this. Sorry, Sau Sheong.
Paul, you're on mute.
Sorry. No, I was going to say we're just about to the end, and we're probably not going to get to the whole Silicon Valley Singapore thing, because I think that's probably a discussion on its own. But I am going to ask you all just to answer one parting question, is that based on your careers today, for an aspiring, for a software engineer, someone that's building their career in that space, that has aspirations to become a CTO one day, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them? And just very short and sweet. Who would like to go first?
Probably I'll go first.
Okay.
Probably I am very new to this position as well and all that. I think in all of in just looking back in my career as well, I never thought of that I will be a CTO, and it was never my dream. It just so happened that it happened, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the people around me who has given me that opportunity, to lead and to be working with this very good, well-rounded people. I'm grateful for that. So I guess what I'm saying is more like, whatever you want to happen tomorrow starts today. In one way, the decisions that I had made in my days ago or years ago, is what led me here in one way or the other. With I didn't force anything, but it's really more on, I just for a software engineer, I just really enjoy it. I just really enjoy coding. I just really enjoy solving problems, and it's just so happened that people around me saw it, and that's what I wanted to impart. Like, just do whatever it is that you are passionate about, and people around you will see it. You don't have to worry about your manager not seeing it. Of course, if you have like a very bad manager and you feel like that manager is kind of like, always like not opening opportunities for you, then probably it's time to move on. But it will show up. Whatever it is that you're good at, it will always show up. People cannot hide that. And you just need to stay true to yourself. So that's my advice. Whatever you're doing right now affects what's gonna happen to you tomorrow, good or bad. That's what your decision is gonna lead you also. And whether this is the job that you wanted to take on later on, then equip yourself as you go along also. And also, like, surround yourself with people that are that's gonna help you also to achieve that, if that's what you wanted. Always, that I in my 20 years journey, what I really enjoyed, not just the people, not just the company or the products that I built, it's really the people. I really enjoy creating those relationships with those people. I think those are the takeaways that I have. Like, I enjoy my time in Yahoo because of the people that I'm still friends with until now. You build those relationships, and those relationships actually will help you open doors later on. Will help open doors later on for you. And your integrity is what you have when you are working. So show them what you are, like, and things will just happen. Hopefully it will happen for you as well. I think that's for me.
Thanks, Beverly. Ned?
I guess it would be to actually ask yourself the question is if you want to be the CTO or not. I think I've spoken to a lot of people who really want to be something like a chief architect, or really want to be something like a, individual contributor, superstar lead developer, and that they think that CTO means that that's what they'll be able to do. When actually, depending on the size of your company, and I suppose it might not be true at all companies, but in CTO, you'll be spending at least half your time working on audit, at least half your time working on budget, at least half your time working on HR issues, at least half your time on hiring people, and that the amount of time you'll spend on really cool tech is relatively low. And I think a lot of people, they say they want to be CTO because they're enamored by the title, but they don't actually want to be, what they really want to be is chief architect. So ask yourself what you really want to get out of this. Ask yourself what makes you happy, and then go for that, and don't chase the title.
Great advice. Thanks, Ned. And Sau Sheong?
Yeah. So I think CTO, the role is very, very broad, because it depends on what kind of company that you are actually being CTO in. I think as a startup, then the role of a CTO is more roll up your sleeves and actually do more work. But as the company changes and grows, actually different types of CTO are needed, and the CTO will play different roles. But all in all, whichever it is, the CTO is a leader, right? He's a technology leader in the company. So that comes with certain responsibilities in being a leader. So you do need to deal with people. You need to manage people. You need to deal with different situations where you need to show leadership. So for anyone who wants to be a CTO, I think they need to show that kind of leadership, right? So at a larger company, and a larger organization, being a CTO really means to the sense that you will be handling mostly HR and finance issues. You will be talking about budgeting issues. You will not be really talking so much about technical issues. You will not be coding, for example. You will not be doing things that are more for technology focused. In fact, in some companies, CTOs might not be a technology leader after all, right? So, and the CTO doesn't necessarily means that he or she will report into the CEO. I've seen CTOs report into the CIO. I've seen CTOs report into the COO. So there are many variations of what a CTO means. So that question about advice to be a CTO, I think that will really depends on what kind of CTO do you want to be and what kind of organizations you're joining. But I think all in all, it does mean leadership, because CTO is a C-level executive. in whichever context it is, and that means leadership. So if you do not aspire to be a leader, you aspire to just execute, then I think the aspiration to be CTO is probably wrong. So that's really my advice.
Great. No, listen, I think that's really good advice. And thank you all so much for sharing your experience and knowledge. I mean, certainly from my perspective, I'm not a software engineer, albeit we do talk to them a lot. And I think what I've come away with is kind of like the passion you guys have for actually really solving problems, making an impact, you know, working with a business, partnering. So it's been very, very insightful, and hopefully the audience have gained a lot from this. We have recorded the event, we will post that, so that'll be available on our LinkedIn page and also on gritsearch.com over the coming days. So you know, please do check it out. And Beverly, Ned, Sau Sheong, thank you so much for spending the time today, and as I say, sharing your experiences so far. I'm sure it's been super helpful to those that attended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So thanks everyone. We're going to sign off now, and I hope everyone has a great day.
You too.
Cheers then.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.